All right, all right, good. Hey, I've just started looking at the report. That's an amazing amount of work and really, I mean, I don't think there's anything like that.
Yeah. Oh, I feel. I agree. You're.
No, but what if you, and then there's no paywall. And
Yeah.
at some point you offer people and pay what they think is worth or something.
Yeah, yeah, and then if for office, if you wanna come to office hours or offer that for people who are
But
paying.
the courts and all those materials. Now, I haven't looked at carefully. Yesterday was on, I could not find the worksheets. That must be a link that's somewhere, but I couldn't find it.
Okay, well, I'll throw it to you, but it is a big button, right at the top.
All right, okay.
So maybe that's what is confusing, because it's a big button. Maybe your eyes just,
Wondering went by.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a donate button or something.
well, there's just one download of the spreadsheet. That's what you're talking
Well,
about.
I did the download, but that was sort of the course outline.
Yeah, and then on each unit, there's one document to make a copy of, and that's also like black, but
That's the one that has those.
it's just one worksheet. It's a checklist to be able to for yourself. But, yeah, so it's like,
Which obviously people could go.
well, and it's also like, I think it's gonna be a slow snowball of like me getting feedback on it,
Yeah.
because as soon as people have to really get into it.
I started with the forecasting plan.
Oh, you did? Okay.
And I really like that you made that forecasting sort of before the cash
Cash
flow.
flow. Okay, yeah, that's a little different than how people usually do
And
it.
you can do the cash flow as much as they want.
Yeah.
And good wise that it could take longer than that.
Yeah, yeah,
How many minutes do you envision this to be?
just 3 for the financial foundations, and then 3 for investment. Yeah, and like the deliverable for investment management is the investment.
Okay. Yeah. Cool.
The deliverable for the foundation.
Which we sort of just jumped into. Coaching.
Yeah, you mostly, well, I mean, I do.
Oh, so you have it.
A lot of experience from.
So do you have the slides from?
And also, working with Katrina and also. Drafts of
Yeah. The financial forecasting. At this stage of life in our circumstances, sometimes we get.
Right, exactly.
But it is really the critical piece for certainly young people. Oh. We should get it. Okay, no, come in. I see we're
Did you
doing.
get my
Okay.
file?
Yes, I,
Very.
oh no, that's the annual meeting.
Like a
Oh, there we
shared-
go.
Yeah,
Yep.
there you go.
Yep.
Okay, sweet. I heard you had traffic.
Oh, I think it's on.
That. Or I could remember this back.
There you go.
Is this clear?
Yeah, it can sound explained, you know, like it sounds.
Pretty awesome. Curious to see what emerges.
Testing, can you hear me?
Yep.
You need
What are you
to.
doing there?
Started. Right.
We need some time, so we can practice them. This is Rebecca Blumen, this is me. You know, Reese encore, yeah. Chapter 2.
Leaving stuff on.
Well, Probably got.
Yeah, I'm,
Piece of paper and some mercury. Yes, thank you. You go back. This is the absolute. They're absolutely.
They're not allowed.
Oh,
okay.
This is Eugene's. Yeah. All right, you need to grab whatever.
Well, okay, good morning. Happy to be here. I'm Rebecca Chalmers Blumenshine. And I'm excited I'm really grateful to be welcomed back, after speaking with you a few months ago. And I'm here today to talk about holistic portfolio thinking, also known as peace sign portfolios, and I'll explain what that means as I go through here, and I'll just share what I'm thinking for our time together. So I was thinking just a brief review from what we talked about last time, and then I will get into this topic of holistic portfolio thinking. And I'll explain kind of what I mean by that, and I'll talk a little bit about what like the status quo traditional personal finance perspective is on this topic. And then mostly I will share an alternative perspective, and then we can have some conversation about that. And the alternatives perspective, you will see why I call it a peace sign portfolio when we get to that. And I do expect we're gonna run out of time in the Q&A again, just to foreshadow that, but this time I got more official and I brought cards. So if anyone wants to follow up and want to talk with me after, love to chat with you. You can email me, and then you'll also see on my website on the card. It's bothandfinance.com, and I now have a lot more resources on that website, even than last time when I was here. And in particular, I have a free self-directed course related to this idea of community-minded personal finance that I've been sharing. So you can check that out if you're interested. So review from last time I was here, I shared this idea of the finance matrix. And I said we can kind of think about the world of finance as kind of something that we could potentially map, just in theory, across two dimensions. With one dimension being what is our guiding motivation, and you can think about one side of that spectrum as being individual, like a guiding motivation of just individual capital accumulation. And you can also think of another side of that spectrum being people who are motivated by collective thriving. And I said there is parts of finance that really does exist of people thinking about how do we use finance for collective thriving. And then we talked about this other side of the spectrum related to what is our economic logic, what is our underlying assumptions about how the economy works and how people work in our economy. And I said on one side of that, we have like our dominant economic logic today that is like old school textbook Econ 101 economic logic. And on the other side, we have everything. And then I shared this idea that like, that matrix is about the whole field of finance, the whole world of finance, but even within the specific category of personal finance, one thing we can see if we go out into the world and look for resources around personal finance is like the dominant, most prominent thing that we're going to find, at least when we first go looking for these resources, typically is going to be something that sort of is bounded by this red bubble that I'm showing here. That's really like, there's an assumption that your guiding motivation is individual accumulation, and there's no kind of questioning of the dominant Econ 101 textbook logic about finance. And then I shared that the good news is there really is other resources and ideas and ways of thinking about personal finance out there. They're just a little bit harder to find. And just to kind of think about what those are, we can think about this general category that encompasses all of what's shown there in the green box as community-minded personal finance. And that's what I'm really interested in. So today I wanted to share, that was kind of like a very theoretical conversation that we had last time. So today I wanted to share an example of like one potential application of this community-minded way of thinking about personal finance to a specific topic. So the specific topic I'm picking is actually personal investment portfolios. And I like to think about that as holistic portfolio thinking, and I'll explain what I mean by that. But I want to acknowledge that it's nice to like pick a specific topic so we can get more tangible and give you like a true example that you might be able to apply to your own lives. But this gets really tricky in this world that is, you know, where there's such a vast disparity in wealth and income across different people in our world today. And so we risk, when we get more specific, like getting into things that can be triggering on one hand or like really loaded, or like boring on the other hand, just because that's the world we live in and we all have such differences in our relationships to topics like this. So I think that what I'm offering here is pretty general, and I'll be curious your thoughts on it, but for those who want, so I'm going to stay general, but for those who want more detail, I wanted to offer, I have an essay on my website that you can find where I go into a lot more detail on this topic. And I also link to a lot of other references and resources if you're interested, and it's called Rethinking a Balanced and Diversified Portfolio. So you can find that on my website, bothandfinance.com. But generally, what I am interested in talking about here is our personal investments, our personal investment portfolio. And I think a framing question for what that can mean is something like, how can I deploy my resources now to increase my chances of having a thriving future? And we can, the exact wording of the question is not important. What's important is these concepts of, we're talking about resources we personally have access to today and how we're using them with an eye towards the future. And then we're also talking about, we're recognizing that we cannot control the future. That the best we can do is like think in probabilities. How can we increase our chances for good outcomes and decrease our risk of bad outcomes? That's just like the general framing concepts that we're thinking about here. And then this would be part of kind of like a status quo personal finance answer to a general question like that. They'd say, you know, if you go to a traditional site where you would learn information about personal finance and investing, somewhere you're going to find something that like this that's saying, well, you need to build a personalized investment portfolio of a mix of securities, of stocks and bonds and cash, et cetera. And what's really important is that it be balanced and diversified. Probably have seen these words out there potentially in the world of personal finance. And then, you know, in the status quo perspective on personal finance, there's this idea that like the way that you determine what is a good balance, what is good diversification, which is just another word for a variety of different things, is that you somehow put an input, you determine what is your risk tolerance. And this is, you know, you're told this is your willingness and ability to bear risk. And then you get an output that is like, based on your risk tolerance, this is your optimally balanced and diversified portfolio that's personal to you. And really in this context, all that this means is what mix of stocks and bonds theoretically delivers the highest expected financial return for your level of risk. And you can see I have lots of things in quotes here, and I just said a lot of jargon, and we'll move past this now. But what I wanted to just what I'm trying to frame up is that there are all these words, these concepts, everything I put in quotes that have very specific meanings, like very narrow meanings in traditional personal finance thinking. And I think that we can think bigger about all of those words in particular. I think we can think bigger about what do words like balance, diversification, which is another word for variety, and even risk, what do they mean to us personally? And I think we can think of, I'm not saying that we need to like throw out that formula that I showed of like what we do in traditional personal finance. But I'm thinking that we can think about, or I'm suggesting that we can think about that as just one piece of a bigger puzzle of our personal investments. One piece of a bigger pie of how we think about our personal investment portfolios. And so there's an optional take-home activity for this talk, which is gonna be that to invite you to draw your own holistic portfolio. And really what I would recommend with that is truly starting with a blank piece of paper and doing it, with a pen or marker or whatever, to really just use like unlock more of your creative side of your brain. So the opposite of a algorithmic input output model, just truly what's in your heart and see what comes out. Because I think we can think about our investments as so much more than just like our financial stocks and bonds investments. We can think about our investments of our time, of our skills that we build up, of our relationships, and many other things that I'm sure you can think of. But I'm not going to leave you with just this blank circle. Although I invite you to start there for yourself, I'm going to give you a framework that has worked for me for a balance, an optimal balance and diversification from a more holistic way of thinking about this stuff for me. And then you can use that to run with, or it's like a place to start your thinking. So that is why I also call this the peace sign portfolio model presentation, because this is a alternative model that I'm offering as a starting point for thinking about a more holistic way of thinking of our personal investment portfolios.
Can I just interrupt?
Yeah.
If I can say, I thought you called it a peace sign portfolio as homage to your old hippie parents.
Well, I was actually worried I was actually worried that it was like a little bit cheesy, but then, it's memorable, like you need the things that you can remember. This partially comes from my head and my heart, and also comes from a variety of different resources. And I have these specific resources linked in that article I mentioned and on my site. And I'll have them up here as I'm talking about parts of the model that are related to each resource. But yeah, I'll walk you through each part of this model, and then that's basically what we can talk about in the Q&A as well. But what I wanted to share, just to begin this, is you can see there's kind of three main sections. There's this resist and build section, and then protect your own section. And the protect your own, all of these are going to be really personal and different for all of us. But the protect your own section, how you define protect your own, what is your own, is going to be really different for each of us. But the idea is that that's more close to home. That's more like yourself, your dependents, maybe a smaller circle of people that you really are thinking about. And then resist and build sections are more related to collective ideas. Because I know for me, when I really think about investing things now with an eye towards chances of having a better future and reducing the risk of having bad things in the future, to me, almost immediately my mind goes to, well, what's really going to impact that good or bad outcomes in the future is what is the collective situation that I'm living in. So to me, it makes sense, even from a personal investments perspective, to have a big part of how I'm thinking about this be related to collective investments for the future. So that's kind of a balance that makes sense to me. And then within this protect your own section, there's these two sides. So there's this green side, which is related in my mind to personal financial assets. So this is the side that's most similar to what you would see in more traditional personal finance spaces. So we can think of this as building the bank of me. And we can talk about that more in the Q&A if you want to, but I'm gonna go on to the more interesting, more unique stuff here. So the other side of the protect your own section is our personal non-financial assets. So this can be things like tangible investments for personal investments, like investments in housing or investments in things like building gardens for ourselves, or, you know, like tangible investments. And it can also be intangible investments, like things like investing in our health, investing in our relationships. And then of course, investing in education, like building our skills, building our knowledge in certain things. And then, and just as we begin to talk about this, you can recognize that the categories obviously are not like, firm in any of these things. There's blurry boundaries between all of these categories, but it's just like a way to think about this and think about what balance makes sense to us. And then there's these resist and build sections. So this concept of like resist the bad and build the new comes from like classic social change theory, or just like there's a long history of these concepts of resist and build. But I had not heard of it applied to finance in any way until I read the social movement investing paper. So if you're interested in this stuff, I definitely recommend that paper. But I really like this idea, at least for myself, of thinking about, to the extent that I want to be investing in like true systems change for the future. To me, it feels good to think about having a balance in my life of investing on the resist side, investing on resisting the things that we need to change about the system today, and have parts of my life and my resources that I'm investing in the build side, like building the new of what we want to see tomorrow. And if the pie of my investments is like overly focused on resist or overly focused on build, it just doesn't feel balanced to me. So there's this one is like, there's a lot of, you don't have to read all the words here because I really want to offer this as like something to do based on what's in your mind and in your life. But just to give a little bit of flavor to the kinds of things I'm talking about is really when we're talking, I think in these sections, it's less for me about financial investments, certainly less about financial investments with like a financial return for me. And it's a lot more thinking about investments I'm making with my time, with my skills that I'm building up and contributing to the world, my labor, like my work, maybe more donations and direct giving can be part of this. And then something that you will notice, or I certainly do when I start thinking about what, how I'm investing in these parts of the Peace Sign portfolio model, is that the boundaries get particularly blurry. So some things, yeah.
Can you read the words, because it's hard to read here.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. So yes. So some of the things that I have up here is like ideas of things that I think really cross the boundary. Like I have arrows across the boundary of resist and build, are things like reparations work, care work, conservation work, redistribution, arts, healing, stuff like that. And again, I think what these things mean to all of us in our lives are going to be really different based on our circumstances and positionality and how just personally we think about these things in our own lives. Yeah, and so the words I have, and then the words I have in each section, I say investments of time, skills, labor, donations and direct giving. And then on the resist side, I say, like, even things like paying off consumer debt and then trying to work to put ourselves in a position where we can protect ourselves from going into consumer debt and protect those close to us and in our community from going into consumer debt. I see as like one of the biggest kind of impact investments we can personally make. If this is something that we're dealing with in our lives and people close to us are dealing with, because this is a place where I think, you know, there's a return on investment for not being in consumer debt. And it's a way that we're protecting ourselves and people around us from like the worst parts of the extractive and predatory financial system that is like what we want to resist in our world today. And then also, of course, this is the area where things like divestment campaigns would fall. And so I have up there movement-led capital activism. So just, you know, there have been examples of divestment campaigns that have worked really well for resisting bad things, like the divestment around the apartheid South Africa movement. But it's I think sometimes this can get confused now today for people, because you can't invest with a financial return for yourself in something that you're trying to divest from. So just because it's a good strategy doesn't mean it's necessarily a personal investment strategy. Now, of course, we can talk about that more. You can try to stay out of fossil fuels or whatever, but as like a true resistance strategy, it's just one small piece of the pie, in my opinion, of a more holistic way of thinking about how we are investing in the bad of our current system. And then the one other thing I have up here on the build side is direct investments in the new economy. And this is like my big passion and interest. And I would love to say there's an easy way for all of us to be investing in things that like both have some financial return for us to help with our own retirements or whatever it may be, and are really aligned with a world that we want to build in the future. But those opportunities are right now quite few and far between, and they're growing, and it's complicated. And we can talk about that more too, if you would like. But that's a lot of what I'm exploring on my website too. And that's it. That's the Peace Sign portfolio model. And I would love to hear your thoughts and questions. And I just want to remind you that I have this take-home activity to draw your own if you would like. And again, there's also that activity is described in my article on my site too. So you can just scroll down until you see the visual of the Peace Sign portfolio model, and you'll find it on my website. And I thought that I'd love to know your questions, but I thought that some good reflection questions, if you wanted to share your thoughts on either of these, could be, what are some holistic investments that are important to you? Like, what are some ways that you think more broadly than financial investments for yourself about investments you're making today for the future? And what does your version of a balanced and diversified portfolio look like? So, yeah.
It's kind of a timely conversation for us at our Sagers, and I know that you're talking about personal finance, but we're also in the midst of a conversation about conservation on property. And
Yeah.
I really feel like what you're talking about is, you're just using different language. It's kind of the conversation we're having. It's like, what are we building that's an investment for the community? So it's like, it's hard for me to not be thinking about that.
Yeah.
when you're talking.
Well, that's great. Yeah.
Well, because like one of my biggest reasons for being at church every Wednesday night in January to become a property team is so that we can think of ways to develop our property that are outside of the traditional economic models. Like, if we want more opportunities in the build, you know, like if we want more things to be possible, we have to put ourselves out there to create them.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping we can figure that out. It's how I thought about like outreach, like our outreach team has ministries of the month, and then we have organizations that we give to, and so like, as we were thinking about like how we're gonna prioritize these and how we're picking these, we were, not that we had the language, but we were thinking about balancing them between the resist and bills, or like supporting somebody in a situation now,
Yeah,
cause like we're caring for them, and then building a beautiful picture of the future that is God's kingdom.
yeah, yeah. It's definitely like, work that there's not standardized roadmap for, but you're also not alone. Like, there are people across the country grappling with these same questions and trying out different experiments, and it's from my conversations with other people who work in this space, there is this feeling that it's a really quickly growing, like almost like exponentially growing kind of area, across the country and around the world. But it's like one of those things that, almost by definition has to be small and unique and like specific to the situations. Anyway, something we can talk about. If you're interested in looking at examples, I can help direct or share some examples of other places. Yeah.
So I get kind of caught up in investments, but to me, part of our spending is also an investment. I'm
Yes.
investing by
Great point.
spending,
Yeah,
and I really want to, I hopefully do enough research and direct the spending more towards the build, maybe a little bit towards the resist, but more, and like you had up there, spending with time
Yeah.
also is a big.
that's such a good point. Yeah, that should really be on there, and that's such a good point. Yeah.
Can you go back one slide so we can just see the, yeah. It's just-
That's very tiny. I don't know, I don't wanna put you in a box of what my words are up there. I really think that you probably have better ideas than I do of what resistance means to you.
Well, I'd like to hear some dirt on Wall Street. I mean, what's wrong with investing in Wall Street?
Okay, was that a pitch to go to my backup slides here, so. I did not plan her to ask that, but backup slide, I have another essay on my site that is quite long, and I couldn't present it well in a short amount of time. But it's called to stock market or not to stock market, and I go into, I really think there's a lot to consider on both sides for us personally, about making decisions about being invested in the stock market or Wall Street, or just, like traditional publicly traded financial investments. But I do personally have this opinion that as our stock market portfolio grows, especially if we truly do answer the question of how we're investing for having good outcomes in the future as just purely a stock market portfolio, that's problematic to me. And I have this personal opinion that as my stock market portfolio grows in size, it's directly contradicting the work that I might be doing to resist the bad. So it's almost like I can think about it as my return on investments of time and work and donations to resisting the bad is reduced because I'm getting return on investments in a financial perspective from my Wall Street portfolio or my stock market portfolio. So this is not investment advice, and I'm not suggesting that the right answer for anyone is to be in the stock market or not be in the stock market. And I think it's such a gigantic world that most of us are small investments are they have way more impact on us than they have on the market, let's put it that way. But I do have this opinion that thinking about growing that too big, is directly contradictory to the work I want to do.
investing in ESG kind of assets help push that back down, or? is that
That's another
not a-
set.
I have another essay. Complicated question, but really a big part of why I offer this like peace sign portfolio model is because I think we're getting confused with the ESG conversation. And we're thinking that the only way that we can participate with our investments is through our, like, what the stock market is our giant, most large transnational corporations that exist in the world, and it's actually a very small number percentage-wise of even companies in the world. It's like less than 1% of companies in America are publicly traded on the stock market. So if we're saying, oh, we're just gonna narrow down our portfolio to it's still gonna be giant companies, but it's just gonna be the less bad giant companies. And if that's where we are, we really believe our biggest impact is for participating and resisting our current economic system and building a better economic system. I think that's a big distraction, honestly, from where we can truly have an impact. So I don't think ESG is 100% bad or anything like that. I just think that it's a small part of the story, and I worry that it could be a distraction from some more transformative.
So maybe this is in the tiny text that's hard to read from here, but I know you had talked last time about how like when you're talking about the social impact stuff, you don't just mean like donations, you mean stuff that like we can get some sort of return on financially as well as feeling good about it, or you know, contributing to subsidizing in other ways. Can you give some examples of what that might look like?
Yeah, so, yeah, this is like, so I believe that when it comes to actual, like, our financial investment, actually, I have one more slide here. I am really interested in it being more possible for regular people, like not wealthy, not necessarily ultra wealthy people, to have an option in our investment portfolios of like actual financial investments in businesses that have some degree of financial return, probably not as much, in fact, almost by definition, not as much as what you might get in more traditional, like current system investments, but some financial return and that are aligned with the values that we're trying to build for the economy. And there are, again, like experiments of how to do this out there. And it's a growing interest area and it's complicated. And one example is there is this growing space of what's called investment crowdfunding. So this is not like crowdfunding like Kickstarter where it's a donation. It's actually crowdfunding that anyone, it's actual investments in usually smaller companies, and anyone is allowed to invest up to a certain amount depending how much your income and wealth is, but it's not restricted only to accredited investors. Most like private investing, and this starts getting the weeds and I'm gonna lose some people with this conversation, but most private investing in even small companies is restricted only to the wealthiest, like 10% of Americans, what's called accredited investors. But investment crowdfunding is a specific like SEC exemption that was passed in 2011 during the Obama administration, and it's just slowly like building as like a thing and an option. And it's not that well known, but it's getting more well known as like a way for businesses to raise money and a way for community members to invest in businesses. And it makes it possible. There's just all these great kind of side effects of community investing, people who live in a community investing in businesses that are in their community. You know, it helps align for one thing, it helps ensure that the businesses in the community are things that the community values. And it also is often a way for, more diverse owned businesses to get capital because we still have a situation of extreme, racial and gender disparity of where money is going from more traditional investment sources. I don't know if that's one example, like the investment crowdfunding. Oh,
I was just gonna give another example if I may.
okay.
So I went to a presentation last night, actually Becca heard it too. So this is not advice because I've not invested, but I'm actually gonna investigate this group. It's the successor group to the North Country Co-op Development Fund, which I remember from 40 years ago, which helped finance some of the cooperative grocery stores we have in the city. But it's now a bigger entity called
Shared Capital Co-op.
Shared Capital Co-op. They're now national and they provide financing just to cooperatives in the area of worker-owned cooperatives, housing cooperatives, and grocery store cooperatives and a few other areas. And they actually take investments from individuals. They have different types of investment vehicles. And so I'm gonna look at that to see, and that would be a way of you be investing in cooperative enterprises, some of which are, more transformative perhaps than others, but their housing co-ops, for example, are almost all aimed at affordable housing. In fact, they're a group we might even want to look at for some of our property, but or the groups they work with. But so that's an example. There's I'm learning that this is different from when I was in the investment world 25 years ago. There now aren't a lot, but there's maybe several dozen different
Kind of
national
funds,
entities and
funds,
a growing number of very local ones.
Yeah,
Which are maybe not quite right yet for investing, but could be.
mhm.
So it's a growing area, but it's changing and some will succeed and probably some will fail. So it's not going to be a risk-free area of investing.
Here in the next.
So I'm like your dad, I'm still thinking a little bit about their senior situation. So a thing that Rico has brought up a couple of times. is so middle class and upper middle class white people, we tend to think in terms of that first model that we talked about and charitable donations. And so this may be a harsh comment, but like I've been in and out of this neighborhood for 40 years. And the charitable contributions to this neighborhood are still there. And we have thousands more people who live on the street. Poverty is at least around here, worse than it was 40 years ago. And I feel like it's maybe time to question the charitable model. And I'm curious about what this thing Rico has brought up a couple of times, which is about wealth building. And is there like, I have information, maybe others do too, of like, let's just get rid of this burden of this property. Let's get out. And I just wondered, how faithful is that? When what's needed is people that have the opportunity to get kind of like to get a life, an economic life. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so here's the question. So when we look at your peace sign symbol, this is you're putting out an idea for people to think about their individual economic life. But could we practice as a church? Thinking about, because we also have assets collectively. Could we practice as a church? Like, I mean, a way into this for people individually might be to be a part of a group that's practicing together. And also, this question that Rico's been asking is kind of haunting me, like, can we do something that actually changes the trajectory for people?
Yeah, is that similar to what you're doing?
No, I was just gonna say, the organization includes, which means Chicanos, Latinos, Unidos, and Servicio. They have been doing for decades, a program of where 10 people gather together every month, they donate $100. And one person from the group gets that $1,000 every month on a lottery rotation, and it's just continuing. And no questions asked, no strings attached. And then also, many, the BIPOC community have won cooperative settlements against their property owners who own cooperative buildings and housing in this Twin Cities metro area. And that's becoming more and more, it's getting more notice, it's getting more, publicity. So I mean, as far as like black and brown folk, BIPOC people, we've been doing it. And we've had allies, and we, you know, we joke about 10 or 20 people living in the same house, but that's collective bargaining, that's co-oping. And so when we see, I just want to say real quick, when we see people living outside in tents, that's also an economic reality, that people have been doing that since mankind, you know, and so there are other ways. I just want to say thank you to Rebecca.
Yeah, oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and I think, yeah, what you say, so that's why I'm like, I'm so I feel very cautious to share like a framework, because I don't want to imply, especially when we say things like building the new, like that is a kind of problematic idea. I think we talked about this a little bit last time, like there's a lot of, really great collective, you know, on the collective thriving side of ways of thinking about having a better economy. There's a lot of examples of how to do that exist today and also have existed in the past, mostly within communities of color, indigenous communities, Black communities.
And I do want to lift up the Helping Hand Fund is another way of collective bargaining and profit sharing. With the Helping Hand Fund, that is direct cash assistance to people who can just walk into the door or call or email. And it's been helpful to a lot of people that I know.
Yeah, but just on the topic of like thinking about this philanthropy versus investing thing, I agree that we need some other models besides just Wall Street and philanthropy. But I also worry that we would like completely get rid of donations, because there's so many important uses for donations, of course. But there's research that shows that, and it's done by the Federal Reserve, that cities, counties, however they measured it, that have more local ownership of businesses, have more local jobs and higher wages. So there is this relationship between local investing in theory and having better outcomes for the whole economy locally. So that's one of the things that, you know, I'm really interested in supporting.
So one of the small subgroups for the property team met yesterday, and we were the ownership group. And one of the ideas that we were thinking about is not just building wealth in individuals, which is one of the things that we've said is our priority as we're thinking about our property, but also thinking about building wealth in other nonprofits that are BIPOC led. Because like, think about the ELPA, we're the whitest denomination in the country, and our wealth has been, you know, built over time because of all the things that are broken. So how can we help other organizations, other nonprofits build their wealth in a similar way, right, to go and get help our organization? And that could be one of the other ways of our property work, is thinking about learning nonprofits that are BIPOC.
Yeah, and I just want to say, these are all the right questions, and I don't have the answers. I think we all together have it. I'm sure that you have, I mean, whatever you do, whatever decisions you make as a community around us, they're gonna be good learning and a good experience. And that's what we need right now. Well, thank you. Looks like it's